These stories were sent in by real readers, each one a first-hand account of terrifying experiences that defy explanation. The authenticity of these encounters adds an extra layer of horror. First story, The Watcher. Our first story takes us to a quiet suburban neighborhood, where a young woman named Emily was looking forward to a weekend alone. Her parents had left for a trip, giving her the house to herself. Emily, a 24-year-old university student, planned to use the time to catch up on her studies and enjoy some much-needed relaxation. Friday evening began peacefully. Emily ordered her favorite takeout and settled in with a stack of textbooks. The house was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves outside and the soft hum of the refrigerator. As the night deepened, Emily decided to take a break and watch a horror movie, a guilty pleasure she indulged in only when alone. The movie played out its eerie scenes, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Emily laughed at her own jumpiness, feeling secure in the familiarity of her home. Around 2:37 a.m., her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "You're all alone, aren't you?" whispered the voice on the other end. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The voice was low, almost a growl, and sent a shiver down her spine. She quickly hung up, dismissing it as a prank call. But the calls continued. Every hour, her phone would ring, and the same voice would whisper disturbing messages. "I can see you, you're not safe, I'm coming for you." Emily's initial annoyance turned to unease, and then to outright fear. She tried turning off her phone, but the calls persisted, somehow bypassing her phone's do not disturb mode. Emily decided to call her best friend, Rachel, who lived nearby. Rachel answered groggily but became fully awake when she heard the fear in Emily's voice. She promised to come over immediately. While waiting for Rachel, Emily checked all the doors and windows, ensuring they were locked. She turned on every light in the house, hoping to banish the shadows that seemed to press in on her. Rachel arrived within 15 minutes, bursting through the front door with a baseball bat in hand. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded, her eyes wide with concern. Emily explained the calls, showing her friend the call log as proof. As they talked, Emily's phone rang again. This time, Rachel answered. "Who the hell is this?" she demanded. The voice on the other end laughed, a chilling, maniacal sound. "You're too late," it said. "I'm already inside." Rachel's face went pale. She hung up and motioned for Emily to be quiet. They listened intently, straining to hear any sound over their own pounding hearts. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the basement. The girls screamed and clutched each other. "Call the police," Rachel whispered. Emily grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the device. She explained the situation as calmly as she could, urging the dispatcher to send help quickly. The dispatcher stayed on the line with Emily, instructing them to find a safe place to hide. They chose Emily's bedroom closet, a small, cramped space that offered a modicum of safety. They sat in the dark, holding their breath, every creak and groan of the house amplifying their terror. Minutes felt like hours as they waited for the police. Then, they heard the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder. Relief washed over them, but it was short-lived. The closet door slowly creaked open, and a shadowy figure loomed over them. It was the intruder, his cold smile illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the window. In his hand, he held a knife, its blade glinting ominously. "Found you," he whispered, his voice the same as on the phone. Emily and Rachel screamed. But just as the intruder lunged at them, the police burst into the room. They tackled the man to the ground, handcuffing him while he snarled and fought like a wild animal. Emily and Rachel were pulled to safety, their ordeal finally over. The intruder was identified as a local man with a history of mental illness and a fascination with horror films. He had been stalking Emily for weeks, studying her routines and planning his attack. The police found disturbing evidence in his home, including photographs of Emily taken without her knowledge. Our second story comes from a small rural town. A young man named Jack was house-sitting for his neighbors when strange things began to happen. Jack, a 28-year-old mechanic, was doing a favor for the Johnsons, an elderly couple who had gone to visit their grandchildren. The Johnsons' house was a charming old farmhouse, filled with antique furniture and family heirlooms. Jack arrived on a sunny Saturday afternoon, ready to spend a quiet week looking after the house and their dog, Max. The first few days were uneventful. Jack enjoyed the peace and quiet, spending his evenings reading and playing fetch with Max in the spacious backyard. On the third night, things began to change. Jack was in the living room, engrossed in a novel, when he heard footsteps upstairs. Max, lying at his feet, perked up and growled softly. Jack's heart raced. He knew he was alone in the house. Grabbing a flashlight and a heavy wrench from his toolbox, Jack crept upstairs. The old wooden floorboards creaked under his weight, each step amplifying his anxiety. He checked each room, finding nothing out of place. But the feeling of being watched lingered. The next night, Jack woke to the sound of creaking floorboards. He glanced at the clock, 3:15 a.m. The footsteps were louder now, more deliberate. Jack's mind raced with possibilities. Was it a burglar? An animal? Or something else entirely? He decided to investigate. Armed with his wrench, he cautiously made his way downstairs. The house was eerily silent, the only sound his own breathing. As he reached the living room, he noticed something odd, muddy footprints leading from the front door to the center of the room. The prints were fresh, and his stomach churned with dread. Jack followed the footprints, which abruptly ended in front of the old grandfather clock. He inspected the clock but found nothing unusual. Confused and frightened, he returned to bed, resolving to call the police if anything else happened. The following day, Jack found a message scrawled on the bathroom mirror, "Get out now." The words were written in what looked like lipstick, but he hadn't seen any lipstick in the house. His first thought was to call the police, but he hesitated. He didn't want to overreact if it was just a prank. That night, Jack made sure all the doors and windows were locked before going to bed. He kept the wrench by his side and Max at his feet. But sleep eluded him, and every creak of the house made him jump. Around 2 a.m., Jack heard a loud crash from the attic. Max barked furiously, and Jack's blood ran cold. He grabbed his wrench and flashlight, his hands trembling. Slowly, he made his way to the attic, the stairs groaning under his weight. The attic was dark and filled with old furniture and boxes. Jack swept the flashlight beam across the room, his heart pounding. He saw nothing unusual, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and went out. Jack fumbled with it, his fear escalating. In the darkness, he heard a soft rustling sound, followed by a faint whisper, "You're not alone." Jack's breath caught in his throat. He swung the wrench blindly, hitting nothing but air. Desperation clawed at him as he tried to make his way back to the stairs. Just as he reached the top step, the flashlight flickered back on, illuminating a figure crouched in the corner. The intruder's face was obscured by shadows, but Jack could see the glint of a knife. He didn't wait to find out more, he bolted down the stairs, yelling for Max. Jack and Max fled the house and ran to the nearest neighbor's house, where he called the police. The officers arrived quickly and searched the house, finding no one inside. However, they discovered a hidden crawl space in the attic where someone had been living. The police told Jack that the deranged former owner, who had recently escaped from a nearby psychiatric hospital, had been using the house as a hideout. The realization that he had been living with a dangerous fugitive sent shivers down Jack's spine, leaving him haunted by what could have happened if he hadn't left when he did. Our final story comes from a woman named Sarah who recently moved into a new apartment. Sarah, a 30-year-old graphic designer, had just relocated to the city for a new job. She found a cozy one-bedroom apartment in an old building downtown, drawn to its charm and proximity to work. The first week was uneventful. Sarah spent her days at work and her evenings unpacking and decorating. She loved the high ceilings, the large windows, and the vintage fixtures. But as she settled in, she began experiencing strange occurrences. It started with small things, lights flickering, objects moving slightly out of place, and a persistent feeling of being watched. Sarah brushed it off as her imagination, attributing it to the stress of the move and her new job. One night, she woke up to find her TV on, displaying static. Confused, she got out of bed and approached the TV, ready to turn it off. As she reached for the remote, a figure appeared on the screen, mimicking her every move. Sarah froze, her heart pounding. The figure's face was obscured, but its movements mirrored hers perfectly. Panicking, Sarah unplugged the TV, plunging the room into darkness. She fumbled for her phone and called her best friend, Megan, who lived a few blocks away. Megan arrived within minutes, finding Sarah pale and trembling. "Megan, there's something wrong with this place," Sarah said, her voice shaking. She recounted the eerie events, including the figure on the TV. Megan, skeptical but concerned, suggested they call the landlord. The landlord, Mr. Thompson, was an elderly man who had owned the building for decades. He listened to Sarah's account with a furrowed brow. "This building has a long history," he said. "There have been some incidents in the past. But nothing like what you're describing." Mr. Thompson agreed to inspect the apartment with them. They checked the electrical system, the windows, and the locks, finding nothing amiss. But Sarah's unease grew. She began to notice other odd things, cold spots in certain rooms, the feeling of someone brushing past her, and whispers that seemed to come from the walls. One evening, Sarah returned home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. She hesitated, then pushed it open, calling out. There was no answer. She stepped inside, her heart pounding. The apartment was in disarray, furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, and items scattered everywhere. Sarah's first thought was to call the police, but something made her stop. She noticed a trail of muddy footprints leading from the door to her bedroom. Grabbing a kitchen knife, she followed the trail, her breath coming in short gasps. The footprints led to her closet. With trembling hands, Sarah flung open the door, expecting to find an intruder. Instead, she found a hidden camera, its lens pointed directly at her bed. Shocked and horrified, she backed away, almost tripping over her own feet. She called the police, who arrived quickly and conducted a thorough search. They found more hidden cameras throughout the apartment, all expertly concealed. The police took the cameras as evidence and assured Sarah they would investigate. The next day, Mr. Thompson called Sarah to his office. He revealed that the previous tenant had mysteriously disappeared. The tenant had been a young woman about Sarah's age, who had also complained of feeling watched. Despite a thorough investigation, she was never found. Sarah's blood ran cold as she listened to Mr. Thompson. She felt like she was living someone else's nightmare. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, she began researching the building's history. What she found was chilling. The building had been home to several unsolved disappearances over the past few decades. Each tenant who vanished had reported similar experiences, feeling watched, strange occurrences, and hidden cameras. The pattern was too consistent to be a coincidence. Sarah shared her findings with the police, who reopened the cold cases. Meanwhile, she decided to move out, unable to live in a place that had become synonymous with terror. As she packed her belongings, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She knew the cameras were gone, but the sensation lingered. Sarah moved to a new apartment in a different part of town, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. But the experience haunted her, leaving her wary of every creak and shadow. The police eventually discovered that the hidden cameras were part of a sophisticated surveillance system installed by a former maintenance worker who had become obsessed with the tenants. He was arrested and charged, but the fate of the missing tenants remained a mystery.